Hello and welcome to New Jersey Politics with Laura Jones. I am Laura Jones and we are so glad to have you here. It is a special show. There are a lot of people celebrating birthdays right now, including myself, so I got to thinking, why not invite people with the same birthday to the show? Oh yes, that is happening. We are having our cake and eating it too. Dale Florio is the founder of Princeton Public Affairs and he's standing by. His birthday is February 24th. So is mine. Jon Bramnick, state senator. His birthday is also February 24th, and he is ready to celebrate. So we want you to sit down, make yourself at home, and get ready to enjoy the birthday show. Let's get to it. Joining me now is State Senator Jon Bramnick, a Republican representing the 21st Legislative District. Now, aside from being a member of the Upper House, he is also a member of the very, very exciting, very exclusive February 24th Birthday Club. Happy birthday, Senator.
Happy birthday to you. Of course, the meeting of the club is at a secret location at a secret time. Can't let any of that out because the crowd, remember the last time people knew? Thousands of people showed up. They sent me gifts. So no more mentioning of our big party, okay?
My lips are sealed because we want to have our cake and eat it too. As everybody should on their birthday.
Well, and thank you for the gifts. My gift, I'm still trying to decide what to get you and Dale Florio, but I'll be shopping. I have a little time, so I'll be out shopping this afternoon.
I'll send an Amazon link to that.
Well, you can't pick your own gift,
Oh, okay. I can't do a registry? Okay.
That's right.
Well, we're having a little bit of fun today. And you actually, speaking of fun, you earned the title of the funniest lawyer in New Jersey for your work that you do. You do comedy on stage and funny, haha, like funny, I'm here to amuse you like a clown. Funny how?
Funny comedian kind of, so in the 80s when I won that title, I actually trademarked it. And then the competition was canceled by the Bar Association. So at this point in time, I'm the funniest lawyer for life in New Jersey.
And you are out and about in addition to your legislative responsibilities and the people you represent. You do some stand-up comedy.
True. And, that's a creative outlet. So I spend a lot of time in the middle of the night thinking of the next routine. Something happens during the day and that becomes comedy for me. I think about cartoons growing up. I'm doing this one routine on the Lone Ranger and Popeye. For example, Popeye's buddy, who is Wimpy, who said, "I'll gladly pay you Tuesday for a hamburger today." I said he could be running the federal government.
When it comes to clowning around, so to speak, recently during the State of the Union, there were some shenanigans going on, and you spoke out on that about how you are a Republican, but you also seem to be a Republican who isn't trying to go too far right, too far left. You always try to look for that common ground, and you were a little upset about how some representatives conducted themselves on that on the night of the State of the Union.
Marjorie Taylor Greene acted like a lunatic, screaming liar to the President of the United States during the State of the State. Does anyone think that helps the Republican Party win a majority in New Jersey? All it does, it makes us look like we're not a reasonable alternative to the Democrats. And we need to speak out. I learned in third grade not to scream at someone speaking. I obviously, she never learned it. So what happens is, that becomes the brand for Republicans. And more Republicans have to stand up and say, if we want the brand that's going to win in New Jersey and win the majority, we can't look like we're nuts, no manners, and extremists. That's what she did. And I got to tell you, it's not helpful for our party.
Yeah. Well, recently in New Jersey, we had in East Hanover, a mayor and 4 council members switched from the Democratic Party to Republican, and people in Morris County are very happy about that. And they're saying, well, this could really bode well in New Jersey because this is 2023, legislative seats up for re-election or election. So how do you think how do you think the Republicans are going to be faring looking into this upcoming 2023 election?
Yes, as long as we're not defined by the nuts in our party, people who won't condemn January 6th, won't admit that the last election was legitimate, people who support Marjorie Taylor Greene and her lack of manners. I'm going to tell you, I'm going to lead this effort to make sure that we look like a reasonable alternative. Otherwise, yeah, it's great that we picked up some seats, or should I say some Republicans in Morris County. I give Laura Ali, the chairwoman, a lot of credit for that. But let me just make it clear. Our brand must change. Can't be the brand of Donald Trump, can't be the brand of January 6th. It can't be the brand of Marjorie Taylor Greene. It can't be the extremists in our party. It has to be the people who acted like Ronald Reagan, George Bush. That's the leadership that I like to see in our party.
And when it comes to your caucus, do the members, and I know you can't speak for the members, but what's the buzz? What are they saying? Do they agree with you? Are there, or do they disagree?
Well, I don't blame other Republicans who are afraid to speak out. I think quietly they agree with me. But look, I spoke out and I got the Trumpers running against me in a general election with the Trumpers on my right, the Democrats on my left. Fortunately, I won, but they wanted me out just because I was talking about things that I'm talking about today. So do I think a majority of Republicans want us to be the reasonable alternative, act with class, dignity, civility? Yes. And I'm going to continue to talk like that regardless of the consequences to me.
You are a person who says what they mean. And I go back to your last election campaign. You ran an ad saying, if you call me, I'm calling you back within a few rings or a few seconds.
Fastest return call in government, and it's disrespectful not to return a call. And let me tell you, I've had advisors go, hey, you don't even know whose number that is. I don't care. I work for you. I pick up the phone and I try to solve your problem, and you should be able to get a hold of me, not my staff, me.
Yeah. Well, and on that, when it comes to phone calls, you've drafted some pieces of legislation, and one has to do with telemarketers, and that they would be required to identify themselves within 30 seconds of the start of the call. Because, for a while we had the no-call list. That seemed to work. Now it's not so much. Or then they have our cell phone, and you don't know because now they're cloning area codes where we think, oh, this must be the school calling, this must be work calling, this must be such and such, a friend calling. So can you talk a little bit about that legislation?
Yeah, my Seinfeld bill. Seinfeld had an episode where he picks up the phone and the person on the other end didn't and wouldn't give Seinfeld his phone number. And he goes, well, now you know how I feel. I want to call you at home later tonight when you don't want me to call.
That was a great episode. Yes.
Tremendous. So obviously, if they're calling from some other country and they're, fraudsters, it's not going to help. But it's surely going to help 100% for those people really trying to sell you something. Tell me who you are. Tell me how I can get a hold of you. And then I may talk to you. I probably won't, but at least I'll know who's calling.
A lot of people are talking about what should and should not be taught in school. And this is a hot button topic. But what you're behind a proposal is about grief counseling in health classes, which it's heartbreaking when you think of what our young people have to deal with. And, recently there was a student in Ocean County who took her life after she was bullied. But you're behind a proposal that would teach grief counseling. What motivated you to propose this legislation and to say, hey, this needs to be included in curriculum?
Well, there's an organization called Imagine. All you have to do is go to one of their facilities where young children who lost their parents, and it started after 9/11, they are in groups with other children who lost their parents, and they interact and learn how to deal with it. But more importantly, We're not taught anywhere when someone does lose a loved one. What do you say to them? How do you act? How is the school supposed to react? And it turns out I have gotten incredible support from many people, even the right wing conservatives who tell me, oh, just teach math, just teach science. And no, 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 no. This is health class. Health teaches a lot of stuff. You can teach in health class a little bit how to help somebody who has that kind of grief, or you have grief, because it's not taught at all, but people suffer a lot. And I'm hopeful that this will pass, and every health class, I'm not talking about every day, I'm talking about a very small portion of health class, maybe a day or two, on how to deal with grief, how to help others who have suffered a loss.
Yeah. Final thoughts, any other items on your legislative agenda that you want to talk about? Because, I mean, it is your birthday, so you can talk about whatever you'd like to.
You've hit, the other one is the stalker bill. This is crazy. So there was a young woman who was being stalked by somebody she had no relationship with. So the law in New Jersey is, yes, if you dated the nut, you could get a restraining order. But if you had no relationship with the nut, you couldn't. So we actually passed a bill in committee today that allows you, young woman or man, being stalked by someone you don't have a relationship with, can get a restraining order. Thank God. That was the biggest loophole in the domestic violence bill I've ever seen.
Yeah, that is a tremendous loophole.
And you're famous. I mean, people could stalk you, right? But if you didn't have a relationship, you couldn't. Well, maybe in Pennsylvania, but in Jersey, you'd have to file some criminal charges that can take years.
Well, and especially I would imagine with social media, there are so many people that you just know through social media because they follow somebody you follow.
That's exactly right. So hopefully this will pass the full Senate and the Assembly and will protect people from strangers.
Well, John Bramnick, you are no stranger to the show, and I thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us and to celebrate the February 24th Club. It's a lot to celebrate.
Happy birthday.
Happy birthday to you too, Senator. Thank you. If you know New Jersey politics, you likely know the name Dale Florio. He is the founder of Princeton Public Affairs. It's the largest and probably one of the most successful lobbying firms in the country. Dale is also a part of the very exclusive February 24th Birthday Club. Dale, happy birthday to you. Good to see you.
Laura, always good to be on your show. And yes, happy birthday to you. It's certainly the one time a year where we get to reconnect. And it is a special day. For sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Princeton Public Affairs, it's been a fixture in Trenton for more than 30 years. And for as much as things change, a lot of issues seem to always be the same. So for some of the viewers who may not be familiar, can you tell us a little bit about what it is that you do?
Well, I think most people have heard the word lobbyist. We're a state-based lobbying firm, although we opened a Washington, D.C. office 20 years ago. And we also have a separately branded communications company called Princeton Strategic Communications. So we're essentially a one-stop shop for your federal and state, as well as your communications needs. And but here in Trenton, and we're right across the street from the State House, we work with all different types of clients, whether they be corporate, association, for-profit. We even work for some of the building trade unions. And as I've said to people, and when I've had the chance to go and talk to high schools and college students, I remind them, I said, democracy is not a spectator sport. And unless you're in it, and somebody, whether yourself or somebody is speaking on your behalf, you can get left out. It's, as I said, it's not a spectator sport.
Well, and there's so many things that people, some people will say, I'm not interested in politics. It doesn't affect my life. And then, you'll say, okay, well, how much time you spend in the classroom, that traffic light, everywhere you look around, government does. Impact your life. So right now, I know that, like I said, for as much as things change, there are certain issues that are always issues, cost of living in New Jersey. But are there any certain priorities right now that are percolating to the top of your radar over at Princeton Public Affairs?
Well, I mean, certainly from a client standpoint, there's a lot of things going on in the healthcare space. We do a lot of work led by one of our other colleagues, Bill Pascrell, in the gaming space. Um, and we also do a lot of work in the what I would call the civil justice space. You know, to be the ability to sue somebody or not sue somebody. And then, of course, I would say the issue that, you know, in addition to taxes, that never goes away, but certainly education, the education space and privacy in some respects are linked together. Parents seem to be getting more involved. I think this is an outgrowth of the pandemic, but more involved in their child's education. And that's a good thing. Makes it more difficult, I think, for teachers and for administrators. But again, it's still a good thing. And you know, how we fund education in New Jersey continues to be an issue. So, as you said, some things just never change. Taxes and education are at the top of the list. There are other things that percolate along from day to day. And you know, when I served on the Somerville Borough Council back in the 80s, one of the biggest issues in downtown was enough parking. Well, if you go to Somerville today, they're still talking about the same issues of how do we get more parking. So the same thing applies in Trenton. We'll always be talking about taxes. New Jersey will always be a very expensive state. And, you know, we'll continue to see how we can fix that. But hope springs eternal.
Yeah. Well, and I think one of the things that you brought up, it's really important. So many parents are getting very involved in education and, you know, a little off topic, but I think what made me a better parent and advocate for my child is kind of understanding how things do work and how to navigate. And, you know, when you say, oh, I don't like X, Y, and Z happening, why can't you change it? Understanding a little bit about how Trenton works and all the different moving pieces definitely, I think, has helped me be a little bit better advocate for my children. But like I said, that's getting a little off topic. And, but it is the birthday show, so we can talk about that.
But as I said, I mean, you know, people need to be more involved. You know, I'm constantly reading polling data suggesting people have this very negative attitude, but they need to stay involved. That's what makes the democracy work, whether it's in your local community, whether it's at the county level, to the state level. That's the only way our elected officials are going to understand what we want, what we need. Because with the traditional media that's died, the newspapers, you know, everything is now so digital oriented. And, you know, anybody can put anything online. So being involved enough to know what's factual and what's not is a much more difficult task for people today. And, hence, again, the need to be involved for sure.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, and just physically walking around in Trenton and seeing who's talking to what person gives you a certain perspective. And, you know, as a reporter, I always took that very seriously, you know, when explaining issues that are going on. Well, understand that, you know, this is why people might be talking one way or another. And, you know, aside from, you know, always talking about taxes and how expensive it is in New Jersey, what also seems to be something that everybody loves to talk about is our governor and the presidential aspirations. And no matter who the governor is, and you know, Phil Murphy is in his second term. He can't run again, and we're in the middle or coming up on a legislative election in 2023. But you know, how does this affect how work is done in Trenton when you have somebody who has said, Phil Murphy has said, listen, I think Joe Biden is running, and I'm going to support him. He's not saying I'm not going to run, but you know, how do things like that affect how work is done in Trenton and whatever it is, whatever clients you're advocating for, you know, trying to get things done in that perpetual state of always running and always looking at the next office?
Well, listen, in politics, communication is key, right? And not just phone calls, but actually in-person meetings. So as you know, during the governor's administration, the State House has been shut down because it's under rehabilitation. The governor's literally at the other end of the block. That alone has cut down on communication, that informal conversation where the governor could quickly get together with legislative leaders because all they had to do was go right around the corner in the hallway. So a little thing, but in many respects, a big thing. New Jersey's governors always run the year after a presidential race, and it's us and Virginia. So the national attention definitely focuses in on New Jersey and Virginia during those cycles. So New Jersey governors get a lot of media attention, and it's prompted all of them. I mean, I remember Jim McGreevey, Christy Whitman, even John Corzine, and certainly Chris Christie, all mentioned as potential presidential candidates coming off a gubernatorial win. Again, part of that because of the spotlight that New Jersey attracts during that off election cycle. Phil Murphy has been blessed through the same thing. Now, he's enhanced his presence by running the Democratic Governors Association, and he's also chair of the National Governors Association as well. So he's developed a national platform for himself. He's not the only governor, U.S. senator on the Democratic side that is there in case President Biden chooses not to run. But there's no doubt about it that when you look at his daily schedule, the people that he's meeting with, the groups that he's talking to, he is making sure that if something changes with the president, that he's in a position to be seriously considered. How does that affect in New Jersey? Well, depending on whom you talk to, some will say, well, it's better. But I think the legislature kind of likes it because they don't necessarily have the governor sending things down the street as often as they might have received in the first term. But at the end of the day, the governor's pen has to go on any piece of legislation. So, the governor has a very capable staff, so that while he's traveling, they can certainly keep the trains running on time. So far, so good. We're coming up on the budget season, and the governor is blessed with surpluses. So having too much money is always better than not having enough money. So the decisions will be a little bit easier. Let me put it to you that way.
The work you do doesn't change, but how you do the job has changed. Like you said, digital, and the State House being under renovation. I mean, that is one of the best things that anyone can do is just physically go and walk around, and you haven't been able to do that and get that daily interaction, walking down Press Row, walking to the governor's press office. I mean, that's got to be it's got to be a real challenge because the way technology is changing. Do you think that once the renovations are done, will it go back to a little bit of the good old days where you're seeing more face to face and having that personal communication back again?
Well, my fellow lobbyists, we were actually talking about this last week, and we're all anxious to have the governor's executive team back in the State House for exactly the reasons you just described, that informal contact that you might have in the State House. What's going to be different about the State House this time around is that they're creating a general entrance way, which will have much more in the way of security. Right now, literally, you just walked in the front door, you went through a magnetometer, and that was it. They're going to have a much more secure entrance way, which I don't know that will cut down on the conversation, but it's going to be more difficult to get into the State House. What we also don't know is that if you know the setup of the State House, I mean, literally, governor's office is split. Half is on one side, half is on the other. So you literally have to cross the hallway to go to the other side. Folks like myself, we kind of stand in the middle there and wait for people to kind of cross over. We'll see if there's going to be some restrictions on where people can stand, like the good old days. But we'll see. I mean, they're expected to be back in the State House before the end of the first quarter.
This is an election year, but before that, we've got a budget address coming up. Anything that you think that the governor might be talking about or prioritizing, or something that people are, like you said, we're flush. We have extra money that people are going to be talking about or criticizing even.
Well, one thing that I've noticed in talking with people, and just since actually the first of the year, because it is an election year, not a governor's race, certainly, but for all 120 members of the legislature up, I think there's going to be a lot of caution. We're seeing it in the scheduling of bills. I wouldn't necessarily call them that controversial. If anything, they're kind of pro-consumer oriented type legislation. So I think you're going to see the same thing in the budget. The governor's talked about tax cuts. That's unusual for this governor. My sense is that they will probably be targeted tax cuts. And he's already said that he's not going to extend the surcharge on the corporate tax that was put in place several years ago. Senator Sarlo, the chair of the Senate Budget Committee, said, "Listen, we're going to let that sunset," and the governor's already acquiesced and said that's going to be fine too. So I would look for some targeted tax cuts. I think some of the human and health and social services type budgets will be replenished. And otherwise, I think it'll be a fairly moderate save money for the rainy day, because everybody is talking about that fiscal cliff. It's not going to happen this year, but I think they're concerned that maybe in the next year or the year after, certainly before the governor leaves, that the revenue stream, certainly the dollars that we received because of the pandemic, are also going to be drying up. So these things go in cycle, and I think folks are trying to plan for a rainy day.
Rainy day makes me think back to the Christy Whitman era. And that was some of the bullet points of her budget. You know, we got the money for the rainy day fund. So it goes in a cycle. And you've been there for so much of it. And I'm just so glad that you've been able to take the time to talk with us throughout the years, and especially today and on our birthdays.
Very nice.
It's a lot to celebrate.
Yes. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Dale Florio, Princeton Public Affairs. So good to see you. Happy birthday.
And to you.
And that will just about do it. There are a few others celebrating their birthdays here on the show, including Bridget McAllister, Gerald D'Ambra, and Pam Solovey. So those are the people who you don't see, but without them, I'd pretty much just be a blog. So happy birthday to my guest, and happy birthday to the very best crew I could imagine. Thank you for all that you do. And my wish for all of you who watch is to have a wonderful weekend. Thank you for tuning in, and we look forward to seeing you back here next time.